Hello once again, I am Mono, and welcome back to this D&D guide for new players. So last time we went through kind of the bare basics of what is D&D, how do you get started with D&D, and a very brief overview of a character sheet. This time I said that we would look into actually making characters, and that is what we will do. We will do a little bit on the mechanics of the D&D side of making characters, and then also quite a bit on what it takes to make a character. What do you need, again, to make a character? So, first things first, we went through all how I got into D&D last time. We don't need to do all of that this time, but I may bring in examples of my characters, because it will help me to kind of get across to you what a character in D&D can be like. But first things first, when making a character, there are many different approaches you can take. As with most things in tabletop role-playing games in general, and D&D, you can take so many different routes to get to where you actually want to be with your character, with your campaign, anything like that. So the most important part about creating a character in D&D, and any tabletop role-playing game, is that you'll want to create a character that you want to play. It sounds simple, it sounds like straightforward, but you'll want to make sure that whatever you're creating is enjoyable for you. This is your character, you're going to play them for a long time, even if it's just a one-shot, which is a one session or a couple of sessions of a campaign that it's just nice and fun, nice and easy to go through. You still want to play a character that you'll enjoy. So when creating a character, get thinking about what it is you want to play. What are you basing your character on? So I play a kobold, which is a little lizard creature, and he is an artificer. He creates things, and I really like the idea of this really intelligent little creature that isn't too wise. He's pretty stupid actually, but he's very, very clever. He can create things easily, and he loves his friends with all his heart. That is his core reason to exist. And I've built this character, Tarkle is his name, upon those ideas. So for you, think about what it is that you want in a character. Did you like Geralt in The Witcher, and you want to play a fighter that is skilled in combat and can hold off hordes of foes? Or are you more of a fan of, say, Gandalf, and you want a really wise old wizard who can pull off some impressive spells that can keep back enemies? It's up to you, but think about that. Think about what it is that you value in a character. You can play so many different characters across your time of playing D&D, you don't have to stick to the same style, but it usually helps to have an idea of what you want to play each time. If that's not your thing, if you don't fancy basing it on something else, you don't have to. Come up with your own idea. If you have the creativity for that, absolutely do it. Say you want to play a paladin who is usually typically a very charismatic and strong class, but maybe this paladin's been forced into their role, and they're a little bit cowardly, they're a little bit frightened of what they have to do. You can do that. Just start thinking of ideas for a character. It's like creating a story in your own head, and once you've got that, character creation might come a little bit easier to you. On this topic, actually, it should be stressed that this is a guideline. When you create a character and you're basing it on something else, or you've had this brilliant idea that you want to work with, if this changes whilst you're creating the character, there's no harm in that. Change it. Let it change. Let it flow naturally into the character that you want to create, the character you want to play. And even if it changes during the course of the campaign, you can discuss with the DM. A good DM will accommodate for you and will help you work out how to play the character that you want. So don't worry too much about it. This is just an idea of getting started with creating a character. Some people love creating characters, some people create a whole host of characters that they can pull out at any moment. Others prefer to focus on the one character at a time. Personally, I am a dungeon master, so I have a mix of both. As a player, I love just focusing on my one character or my two characters, whereas when I'm DMing, I guess I am creating multiple characters at once. I am putting out a whole host of NPCs into the world. So you could look at it either way, but I guess DMing does help in creating characters, creating unique individuals, especially when you see other people's characters and think, I like that, I'd like to take a bit of that. There's no harm in doing that either. Definitely, it's great to take inspiration from sources, whether it's your friends or media or anything you see online. Now, this is the part where I bring in the kind of mechanics of D&D into character creation. I hope now you're sitting there and in the back of your mind you're kind of going over what character you want to play. You're thinking of an elf who is very intelligent and has gone to seek their destiny in a school far beyond the lands. Or you're thinking of a gnome that is a brave knight and wants to bring back honor to their village. Anything, just get thinking of that in the back of your mind now. Because in the meantime, we're going to discuss the kind of core base of a character in D&D, and that is their ability scores. Now, we looked at this very, very briefly in the character sheet in the last kind of video, and now we will look into actually getting our ability scores for our character. The ability scores determine what your character can do, how adept is your character in various areas. So they are broken into 6 sections. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And I will break down what each of those mean for you now. Now, like I said, we have the character sheet here, and these are the ability scores down the side here. D&D Beyond has a section on the basic rules of D&D, and I'll link that actually in the description just in case you prefer reading through these kind of things. All I'm doing is essentially talking you through these in a way that I understand. It's a little bit different, but maybe you would rather read through them, and I'll link that for you there. But it says here that there are 6 abilities, providing a quick description of every creature's physical and mental characteristics, and it describes them there for you. However, I'll go into a little bit more detail on kind of what the different ability scores mean to me. So first up, we have strength. And strength is kind of the pure power, the bodily power of your character. How is their athletic training? How can they exert that pure physical force? It'll impact stuff such as if they can lift up some rubble off a trapped civilian or something like that, or if they can jump over a gap successfully and propel themselves whilst carrying another, or something like that. Then, after that, we have dexterity. So, whilst strength is like the pure physical force, dexterity is more about the nimbleness, those lightning fast reflexes. How easy it is for a character to balance. So, for example, you have your character on one side of a tightrope and some treasure at the other side. How successful is your character at navigating across that tightrope to get to the treasure on the other side? That would be dexterity. It also includes stuff such as stealth or sleight of hand. How kind of sneaky is your character? Then you've got constitution. Now, constitution is similar to strength in the idea that it's how hardy your character is, but rather than how much they can push back, it's how much that they can stay in place when being pushed. It is their core strength, their inherent kind of power. It's their health, it's their stamina. It's kind of all their will to live combined into one ability score. How much can they resist a poison that's trying to get into their bloodstream? How much can they hold their alcohol if they need to? That's all kind of constitution. How much can they hold their breath? How much can they stay awake after a long night without any sleep? That's all constitution there. How inherently hardy are they? So, after that, we have intelligence. Now, intelligence and the next ability score, wisdom, some people can say are quite similar, but they do have their differences. So intelligence is more the kind of up close and personal, the memory parts of things, the mental acuity. And it's investigating something, looking up close at something and seeing if there are any differences, really up close. It also involves kind of magic, arcana. So anything to do with the higher levels of thinking, that will be intelligence. And then you have wisdom. Now, wisdom is kind of your perception of the world around you, and that is a very, very common skill with wisdom and wisdom-based characters is their perception. How much do they notice a small thing? When they walk into a room, do they notice a bloodstain underneath a rug? Whereas someone with high intelligence would probably be looking at the type of rug to see if this is a common rug that you would find in this area, or something like that. Wisdom also helps with understanding other characters, so looking at a person and working out if they're telling the truth, or if there's something they might be hiding. And then finally, we have charisma. And charisma is your character's ability to hold themselves in social situations. So not necessarily being really persuasive and kind of winning a party over, which it can be. Persuasion is a big part of charisma, but it can also be intimidation. How much do they stand out and make an imposing figure on a group of people? Or deception, for example. How much can they lie in a conversation? How could they steer it towards a direction that they'd prefer? This is all charisma as well. Or maybe you've got a character that is a brilliant dancer. That's also a charisma-based skill. So you'd want to look at those different areas to work out your ability scores for your character. But how exactly do we do that? We've got our ability scores, and you can see we've got these boxes down the side here, but what numbers do we put into these boxes, and how do we put those numbers in? To determine the ability scores of your character, you will need to get a way to get 6 numbers to put into these different boxes. It seems pretty straightforward, but different characters will have different benefits from different ability scores. For example, a fighter would probably benefit from having a higher strength and dexterity, as these are the skills that they use in combat and a little bit out of combat as well. However, for now, that doesn't matter too much. We'll talk about that when we get into the class section of this kind of explanation. For now, we will just work on getting those numbers into places, and you can sort it out after that. There are 3 main methods of getting numbers for the ability scores to generate your ability scores in general. One of them is called standard array, one is point by, and the other is rolling for your stats. And that is the order I will explain them now. So first up, we have standard array generation. Now, you can see up at the top here, we have 6 numbers, 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8. This is what is called the standard array. And this is because it is a pretty average set of stats that you could have for your character. The lower the number, such as this 8 here, the worse it is for your character. So if you have a stat that is an 8, this means that it is worse than a stat that is a 15. Your character is worse at whatever they have an 8 in than they are whatever they have a 15 in. So that gives an idea as to how these work. With standard array, you assign each of the ability scores with one of these numbers. The numbers can't be reused, it is just a 1-to-1 assignment. So let's make a character that is particularly strong, particularly nimble. They're quite good in social situations, but they're not very good at holding their alcohol. They're somewhat clever, but they're not very wise at all. So we've got a character that is very strong. We could put a 15 or a 14 in there. So let's put a 14 in there, just to show that they are pretty strong. But they are very, very nimble. So let's give them a 15 in their dexterity. They can't hold their alcohol well. They're not very good at withstanding poisons, and that's the constitution. So let's put that down to a 10. That's quite low. Intelligence, they're very, very smart, so we'll give them a 13. Wisdom, not too wise. We'll put that at an 8. And then charisma, the last one we've got remaining, is a 12. So you see how each of those numbers up there has been used once in the standard array ability score generation. And that is how standard array works. Straightforward, not any randomness to it. You decide where the scores go, and in they are popped. The next ability score generation method is point by. Now, point by is a little bit more customizable than standard array, but still not random. This is more about what you want, and you can tailor it more to your character. Point by is personally my favorite method because it just allows a little bit of certainty in your character, and you can play them exactly how you want to play them. Now, point by is working upon the basis that you have a total number of points that you can invest into your character. Imagine it like a role-playing game, a video game. You have these skill points that you can invest in your character to make them better in certain areas. So, you begin with all your scores at 8, and you can add a point in to increase that score. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio increase though. As you can see here, when we spend 1 point here, it will go up at this section here. So we put 1 point into strength, it goes to 9. And this continues all the way to 13. So 13 is 5 points up. So you spent 5 of your 27 points in strength to increase it from an 8 to a 13. However, if you want to put this any higher, from 13 to 14, it costs 2 points. So we've now used 7 points. So to go over that again, 13 was 5 points, 14 was 7 points. And then if we want to go even higher to 15, which is the highest you can assign in a typical point by, it goes up to 9 points. So we've used up 1/3 of our points in just one skill, but we have got it as high as we can possibly get it. And then you will go through and change the rest of the scores, investing points to make it exactly how you want your character. So now that we've put 9 points into strength, why don't we base a character around this? We'll have a character that is very strong, very hardy, somewhat nimble, but they're not very smart. They're not too wise either, but they are pretty charismatic as well. So let's increase their dexterity to 12. From 8 to 12, that's 4 points. We've used 13 out of our 27. We said that they're quite hardy, so let's increase that to a 13 as well. Now we've used 2/3 of our points. We only have 9 remaining to invest. And we'll put 3 of those into charisma, and we still have 6 left. We said that they won't be too wise or intelligent, so let's increase that charisma a little bit more. And now we have 5 points remaining. We can put 2 into wisdom, 3 points remaining, and we'll put them into dexterity. Notice how we only increased 2 in dexterity, 13, 14, but the increase from 13 to 14 is worth 2 points. I will put a section following this about the increase in points, just to make it really, really clear. But you can see again how now we have our ability scores generated. Now, just by the nature of randomness, we have assigned the same points as the standard array. So this case is not different to standard array. However, if we say took a point away from constitution and added it to intelligence, this is now different to standard array. We have 15, 14, 12, 9, 10, 12, which is different to the 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. So you can see how point by is more customizable for your character. You can tailor it a little bit better than you could standard array. So here is a homemade explanation of the points in the point by system. So you can see that because we start on 8, it costs 0 points to reach 8. And then from everyone up to 13, it costs an extra 1 point to get from 8 to 9 to 10 to 11 and so on. So to get to 11, for example, it'll cost 3 points. Plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, 3. However, when we get to 13, increasing to 14 costs 2 points, 5 to 7, and 14 to 15 is 2 more points, 7 to 9. So hopefully this gives a brief overview. Feel free to pause it here if that will help you look at the different points, but that gives an overview of the point buy system. And last but certainly not least, we have rolling for stats. Now, here on screen I have an online stat roller. This could be something that you want to use, but all you need to roll for stats is d6s. Now a d6 is a standard 6-sided dice, such as this one. To roll for stats you will need 4 d6s, and all you will need to do is roll those 4 d6s and subtract the lowest number. Once we have done that for one of the ability scores, we will do this 5 more times and then assign the stats. To make this make a little more sense, I will show you with an example. So, for example, here, they have rolled 4 d6s. You can tell that they're d6s by those square faces there. And on this one, they rolled a 1, a 4, and a 6. Now, that's 4 of them. We need to drop the lowest one. So, we will drop one of the 1s and add the remainder. 1 plus 4 plus 6, which makes 11. So 4d6, dropping the lowest one to get the score. Another example, we've got a 3, a 6, a 6, and a 2. This 2 is the lowest, so we'll drop it, giving us 3, 6, 6, which is 15. Now, that means that with this method of generating ability scores, the highest score you can get is 18, which is 6, 6, and a 6. And the lowest score you can get is a 3. 1, 1, and 1. And if you also rolled another 1 and dropped it, you would still be left with 3. So when I roll for stats in this way, or I get my players to roll for stats in this way, I allow them to re-roll one of their stats if they don't like it. Due to the random nature of this, it just makes it a little bit easier. So, if we roll a new character here, it does all of those bits for us. These are excellent scores. This wouldn't need re-rolling at all. Everything's above 10. But this could work out as a set of ability scores for your character. Notice how it's different from point buy, and it's different from standard array. Standard array being 15, 14, etc. And point buy having a set number that you can go above. You couldn't get a score like this in point buy at all. This would be way too many points. And standard array, there's no 8, there's no 10. Again, this is sometimes better, but it can also be sometimes worse. It's that random element to it. Some people enjoy it, other people don't. So to make things easy here, we will use standard array to fill in the ability scores for our character. As we go in more and we decide on the class and other elements like that, we may change it, but for now we will just keep it nice and simple and stick with standard array. So we have 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, and 8 as such. Now, we filled in these little boxes here, but what are these big boxes above? Each ability score gives you an ability modifier, depending on how good your ability score is, and that is why it matters where you put the different ability scores. So, with Charisma at an 8, that gives you a -1 to your ability score in Charisma. Wisdom at a 10 gives you a 0 to your ability score. From here, Intelligence with a 12 will give you a +1, and a 13 is also a +1. Dexterity as a 14 will be a +2, and Strength will be a +2. Again, here is a table giving a brief explanation of how these different numbers work out with ability score modifiers. So whilst you might not use every single part on this table, it could be another good part for you to pause the video and look at your ability scores that you have got through standard array, or point buy, or rolling for stats, and determine the modifier now. So we've got the negatives go up to 9, and then 10 to 11 is a 0, and then 12 plus is going to be a positive modifier. The relevance of these ability modifiers is that they impact your skills that your character can do. When you're asked for different checks, these are what come into play. But this will be explained further on. So, at this point, if you haven't already, what you might want to do is begin generating some ability scores, whether it's by standard array, point buy, or rolling for stats. It might be worth giving each of these a try and seeing which you like best. But get something in, get it on your character sheet, because in the next video, what we'll do is we'll start adding in the origin and the class of your character. Continue to think about what kind of character you want to play, and then we will start to bring that in next time. So that brings us to the end of this part of the video, where we have generated our ability scores, be it through rolling, standard array, or point buy. And then next time we will start to work on the character itself. What kind of character will you be playing? Thank you again for watching. If you have any suggestions for things you'd like to find out more about, any questions at all, please let me know and I will include them for you. But yes, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one.